Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of My Take on China. And today we're looking once more at the topic of democracy, specifically China and US democracy, a comparison. I've been asked to explain the principle of democracy in China. The question from a YouTube comment coming from Macy J. Debovsky, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, was posed like this. It's a good question. It said, Jerry, could you explain in more detail how Chinese model of government works and why it is the way it is? Obviously, China is so successful, at least in some part, because of its authoritarian regime. I disagree with that. In order to achieve it, corruption must be very low or next to absent. How come Chinese people are not afraid to give all the power? What drives this trust that government will not abuse its power, will not get corrupt and will stay on the correct path, etc. So let me start by saying the type of democracy in China is even greater than the type of democracy George Washington sought when he was the first president of the United States. Many Americans are going to hear this and hate hearing this, but George Washington was of the same mind as Xi Jinping and the rest of the Chinese government. Now, I can imagine I'm hearing splurts of coffee and roars of indignation. George Washington was no communist, people will be shouting at the screen right now. And that much is true. Of course he wasn't. He couldn't have been a communist. He was a slave owner. He inherited slaves at the age of 11 and freed them only on his death. His wife, Martha Kutsis, was also a slave owner after inheriting them from her first husband. But because she was a woman, she wasn't legally able to make the decision to free or sell them, and when she passed away, they were divided up between her surviving relatives. The similarity between Washington's form of democracy and China's was that all citizens could vote, but that's also the greatest difference too. The population of the United States was over 10 million at the time, but only 350,000 people voted. Free blacks didn't count as citizens, and in 1790, when the record started, there were almost 60,000 of them. Slaves didn't even count as people, and there were 750,000 of them. And of course, women weren't allowed to vote. They were far too emotional, and according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, they were of inferior mind, and the act of voting could actually cause infertility. African Americans and women got the vote in 1920, just 100 years ago, but Native Americans didn't get that privilege until 1924. So unlike China, a huge proportion of United States citizens and residents were excluded. In China, there was a period of strife, wars, both internal and external, and therefore no elections worthy of note until 1954, when the very first National People's Congress was elected. Notably, no adult in China was excluded from the vote for that. And prior to that, the system was a complete mess. From 1912 to 1949, under a Western parliamentary system, there were 5 parliaments and 7 constitutions written. The head of state was replaced 10 times, the Prime Minister 59 times, and the Cabinet reshuffled 45 times. The longest term of office was less than 1 year, and the shortest was less than 1 day. No wonder the Communist Party and the stability we experience in China today are so popular. But back to Washington's point. Presidential farewell speeches are often notable for being predictions of the future, and Washington was the first of many of those. What he said was, partisanship would be the ruin of public liberty. He believed the creation of political parties was a divisive step. He did not, at any time in his presidency, join a party, although he aligned himself with the Federalist side. He was the first, and probably will be the last, independent president of the United States of America. Mao and his successors since 1949 declaration of the forming of the People's Republic of China have been consistent, in terms of politics anyway. Everyone is equal. People will never be forced into servitude or slavery, and everyone born in China has the same rights as everyone else born in China. Mao and his successors also believe, and in Washington's opinion they are right to do so, in the benefits of unity. So although there are 9 political parties in China, instead of opposing each other, they work closely. They supervise each other. China's State Council Information Office released a white paper on this matter in 2021, and China Global Television Network, CGTN, did a far better job of explaining this than I ever could, so I've linked their article here. I'm certain there are a great many people in the United States who would hate to admit it, but China has the kind of government that Washington envisaged, and the USA has the kind of government that he warned them against. So let's look at why it works so well. There are several divisions of governance. There are many layers of governance. And there's a lot of unwarranted criticism of China's governance. Divisions are the 9 parties, the NPC and the CPPCC. Layers are the county, provincial, and then the central government. People often tell me Xi wasn't voted into power. He was, but not only that, he's had to be selected and elected by peers, subordinates, and his own supervisors for every single position he's held since he joined China's government. Take a look at the UK right now. Rishi Sunak was elected by just 202 people, and that election came just 6 or 7 weeks after he was rejected in favour of Liz Truss. Is the UK any better serviced than China? As my subscriber Henry Lee suggests, we live in the UK. We have power to get rid of leaders. Well, it may be true, but then who replaces those leaders? Clearly Liz Truss, who holds the record for being the shortest lived PM in British history, wasn't up to the task. But then Sunak, who was rejected, so the people voting for him clearly thought he wasn't the man for the job until they had no other candidates left. Is that form of democracy better than a man who was elected to every position he's been appointed to during the 40 years of government experience? I think China's got it right. Or as MetaView 7 asks, would you go to a hospital run by a democracy where the janitor has the same say as the doctor? Now, that's an extreme example for sure, as the doctor should have more experience, training and skill than the cleaner. But the same applies in governments, doesn't it? How about we take a logical step forward to a different conclusion and ask, would we go to war behind a democratically elected officer? And the answer is no, of course we wouldn't. And this is why China's system is better than the West. For the most important things that we will ever do, we seek the best qualified and most experienced person or people to help us or lead us with those decisions. Voting for a guy with great teeth or a lady with wonderful fashion sense is not the answer when we need leadership. And voting for them because they promise they will, in the future, give us something that we need is an even worse standard. For every Chinese leader, they have worked from the bottom after leaving university and have been selected as a good supervisor, as a good manager, as a good leader, and if they get to the top, as a great statesperson. But on the way through, they've proven that they can meet expectations every year. They've provided a work report to their department head. That work report included what they did last year, how they did it, and what they plan to do next year. If they can't achieve it, they aren't going to get promoted. If they fail to deliver, they can even be demoted. That's how hard it is in China. And when they make decisions to do something, there's no opposition party which will prevent them. If they make decisions that take years to fulfill, such as the high-speed rail, there's no time limit on their term. And even if they get old, retire, or, heaven forbid, die in office, there will be someone who will come up from underneath, from within the ranks, and with the help of those people above them, carry on those tasks. There's a system in place which is designed to help them to achieve. Because what they want to achieve will benefit China, it will benefit the people of China, and it will, of course, ensure that the party remains popular. Because if they don't, they saw what happened in 1949 to an unpopular Chinese political party, and that's important too. One final point is accountability. China isn't perfect. The world is made up of people, and people aren't perfect. There has been corruption, and it's had some bad times under the communist era. But one thing that's never been done, no law has ever been written to protect members of government. There is no parliamentary privilege under a system that is supervised by the people, which is what the CPPCC actually does. No law has been or would get passed that protects the wrongdoing of people sworn to administer the law. And this is why China's democracy works, and why China has a hugely popular government, because it delivers through the people and for the people what George Washington wanted to deliver to the citizens of his USA. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Please don't forget, like, share, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.